essentially, who do you Dynamax in this matchup? Regieleki on both ends feel a little bit weak, and it's like, you know, it's very fast-paced, but if you don't get the first turn or two correctly with it, it just doesn't contribute very much and faints very easily. So, you know, it makes a little bit more sense to play with the Bulk. From Jeremy's end, anytime you go up against Gothitelle, this Pokemon is so terrifying because if you lead incorrectly into it, it can be absolutely devastating. For example, yes, there's Tapu Fini in the back, but let's say you don't lead Tapu Fini and you bring out two Pokemon that are relatively passive, something like Porygon and Incineroar, for example. Suddenly you're at risk of just getting hit by Hypnosis, and this is a speedy Gothitelle as well, and so that is a big factor in this matchup. But the question is, you know, who Dynamaxes, right? I think for Alex, Calyrex Ice Rider is so powerful, so it's about positioning that correctly, and also making sure that Jeremy doesn't get to heal up too much.
Yeah, I think one thing that'll come into play as well, I mean, you mentioned this idea of bringing Tapu Fini and using the Misty Terrain. One thing that I always have to remind myself about Misty Terrain is that if a Pokemon makes contact with the ground, it'll actually have the damage taken from Dragon-type moves. It's the only interaction like that with all of the terrains, and it's very niche, but when you're looking at a matchup that sort of boils down to Reshiram versus Palkia, it's something important to keep in mind, and that early Misty Terrain could make a huge difference for Jeremy, who's starting it off right there, that Tapu Fini and the Reshiram out on the field against Gothitelle and Rillaboom on Alex's side.
Oh, Misty Terrain goes out first!
Rillaboom apparently slower than the Tapu Fini, and that's going to be a really key for Jeremy to note as we get this game one started.
This is the pressure of Gothitelle, right? And, you know, Jeremy was like, okay, I'm just going to answer with the Tapu Fini. You know, normally Tapu Fini is going to be slower than Rillaboom here, but that's not the case as it actually underspeeds it. And so that means you do not have the Misty Terrain. That means you are at risk of Hypnosis now. But you can see what Jeremy was going for, right? He was like, okay, I don't want to go with something that's too passive. I want to just be able to, you know, protect the Reshiram, allow it to just Dynamax immediately. But now it gets so scary because, like, Rillaboom can pressure with the Fake Out or a Grassy Glide. It is just going to go straight for the Grassy Glide onto the Tapu Fini, and now Gothitelle can maybe Hypnosis.
It will.
It's faster.
That's the fast Hypnosis connecting with that Reshiram, meaning Reshiram, no damage this turn, just going to be put to sleep. Tapu Fini does have the opportunity to go for a Nature's Madness into that Gothitelle to cut its health right in half, but I think more importantly, the fact that Reshiram is asleep already is so unfortunate for Jeremy.
Yeah, you know, going for Grassy Glide there just to really chunk away at Fini, the worst thing Fini could do is protect there, right? But it still doesn't really accomplish very much. The only scary thing there is, let's say, the Hypnosis does not connect to the Reshiram, then Reshiram maybe can just eliminate the Rillaboom immediately. But then you get a free switch into Calyrex and go for another Hypnosis. The thing about Gothitelle is that, yes, Hypnosis is like high variance, but like there's really no better move for it to go for anyway, so might as well give yourself that coin flip that's slightly more in your favor. So that's why Jeremy did not want to Dynamax that Reshiram on turn one. You're not at much risk of taking much damage anyway, but this can get scary really quickly thanks to the Hypnosis spam. The only downside for Alex here is that like Gothitelle doesn't do very much outside of Hypnosis right now.
Right now, but I think that just existing on the field in this form and ensuring that Jeremy won't be able to switch or adjust until Pokemon are knocked out is the most important thing. But the nice thing about Shadow Tag is it does apply for the turn that it's on the field for at the beginning. So even though this Incineroar will switch in for that Gothitelle, if we see Incineroar take any damage this turn and activate that eject button, or alternatively, if it just switches out next turn, you know, that is an opportunity for Alex to trap Jeremy's Pokemon on the field once again. Grassy Glide, though, ensuring that the Tapu Fini will be knocked out without attacking, and Reshiram still asleep. That is that crucial turn two of sleep.
Yeah, like this is the thing with Hypnosis, right? It's like, especially when you're faster, it feels so coin flippy in the sense that you don't know when they're going to wake up, but I think Alex is fine with it even potentially waking up there, honestly, and the fact that it doesn't puts him in an even better position, although, like, maybe he was hoping for the Reshiram to, like, try to target the Gothitelle slot. Instant comes in, we know it has the eject button, so you get ejected out and get a free switch in. So even though the early game has not been great for Jeremy, I think that it's still definitely doable. Notably here, Alex also dropped one of his restricted Pokemon. Maybe he doesn't feel comfortable bringing Palkia into that matchup, or maybe he's actually setting himself for a late game Palkia win now that he's actually eliminated the Tapu Fini. So we'll have to see which restricted Pokemon Pokemon he brought out.
It's nice to see that Porygon 2 on the field at this point, because at least Porygon 2 can help slow things down a little bit, maybe buy some time for Jeremy to figure out how to get this Reshiram to wake up. A Trick Room here would mean that Reshiram is the fastest Pokemon on the field, which could be helpful if it were to wake up. And, you know, Alex is in a crucial position where I think he has to make a switch here or commit to Gigantamaxing that Rillaboom in order to deal some nice damage to that Pokemon.
Yeah, the other thing is, like, do you feel comfortable, like, Trick Rooming, right? Because if you do, and there's Calyrex Ice Rider in the back, suddenly it's like Calyrex Ice Rider can just come out and Max Quake. And so, you know, big question is, what is the final max here? Rillaboom is actually going to move first. It is going to go for the U-turn into Calyrex Ice Rider. That's actually going to activate the weakness policy.
So a great switch there from Jeremy if the Calyrex can hang around long enough to deal damage in the next turn. I'm curious to see if Alex will reveal his fourth Pokemon or if it'll be the return of the Gothitelle, as trapping the Calyrex on the field with an Incineroar opposite it after the weakness policy activation definitely would mean a easy knockout in the next turn. It looks like the Reshiram unable to wake up this turn, and a parting shot from that Incineroar will allow that Rillaboom to come right back in, or alternatively, like you were saying, you know, reveal that final Pokemon on Alex's side of the field, if it's that Palkia or if it's that Calyrex Ice.
Yeah, either way, I think the restricted comes in right now. It's just you need to have some more offense, and Gothitelle does not provide that offense. We know Reshiram is guaranteed to wake up, and actually it is Palkia, so a really interesting line that Alex took here. Basically, he was like, okay, I know that you have Tapu Fini, but if I can eliminate the Tapu Fini, which is exactly why he focused on it so heavily on the first 2 turns of the game, well, Palkia maybe can actually put in some work. However, this turn is really terrifying, right? Because I mean, you actually just activated weakness policy on Calyrex, and so he's got a +2 max Hailstorm now, right? So this is such a big turn because I think Alex maybe just goes for Hypnosis on a Calyrex, max Wormwind into Reshiram. That's one line that you can take. And if you hit the Hypnosis, it feels like you're in such a commanding position, especially with Incineroar in the back. But if you miss, and then the max Hailstorm goes off into Palkia, that's a ton of damage. I guess the other question is, can Palkia maybe survive? Like, you could also go for a, I mean, with max Wormwind, you also decrease the attack of Calyrex.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, we haven't seen these two Pokemon sort of face off against each other, and, you know, I would assume that, you know, both of them are very high special attack Dragon-type legendary Pokemon, so that's whatever attack's coming out is definitely going to hurt. And I would hope that as well, you know, the possibility of a Dynamax from both of these trainers coming through. I believe we're seeing the Dynamax Palkia, like you were just alluding to, that Max Wormwind going to be an incredible utility for Alex.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because Palkia looks both really good and like it can be really rough.
Yeah.
But you're in a position now where you didn't need to set up Trick Room. Palkia's faster. Gothitelle's naturally faster. So Jeremy is going to go for the Dynamax here. You also could theoretically max the Reshiram, right? Because it's got the Assault Vest and it can actually take a max Wormwind. But Hypnosis from the fast Gothitelle here is just that scary. So it is going to be Calyrex Ice Rider going for the Dynamax here. The other thing is, does this Palkia get a one-hit knockout onto Assault Vest Reshiram? Because if it survives, you can just Draco Meteor and max Hailstorm into the Palkia slot. But Hypnosis hits!
Oh man, the second Hypnosis of this game will connect with Jeremy's Calyrex Ice Rider. You know, fortunately, I think this Reshiram will wake up this turn. If it's able to survive, as that max Wormwind will knock it out through the Assault Vest.
With the critical
hit. It's hard to say if that came into play or not, but what a fantastic turn for Alex. Those Hypnosises, it's high risk, high reward, right? You're leaving the Gothitelle out on the field. You can't do damage, but man, if you're able to put those Pokemon to sleep, what an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, I'd love to know the damage calc against the Reshiram specifically there, because with Assault Vest, Reshiram is just so tanky, and so if you can actually survive, then like that turn could have been a complete disaster, right? Where if the Hypnosis misses and you knock out Palkia, suddenly it's like, how do you beat Calyrex Ice Rider? But Hypnosis providing so much value here, and I think Jeremy now recognizes, oh my goodness, the fact that Tapu Fini is faster than Rillaboom means I can't actually lead it. So you got to think about how you can deny the potential sleep, and now, you know, this game still isn't over yet, but like now Palkia just in such a commanding position. You can even switch out the Gothitelle into Incineroar. You could go for a Hypnosis on a Porygon 2 as well. Like, I think Jeremy's path to victory is getting Trick Room up with Porygon 2, and then Calyrex getting a one-turn Wake Up, and then snowballing with its ability.
We did see that Porygon 2 trace Shadow Tag, which means Gothitelle will be able to switch, as Shadow Tag against Shadow Tag kind of cancels each other out. But that Palkia is going to be stuck on the field for as long as the Porygon 2 is around.
Oh
that
my god, 3 for 3!
Who needs to switch when you can just put Pokemon to sleep? That Porygon 2, the latest assist in taking a nap on the battlefield. This Max Wormwind will connect with the Calyrex Ice Rider for a good amount of damage. Also gonna drop its attack down one more stage.
And
another critical hit as well. Will essentially remove the weakness policy at this point, but more importantly, will remain asleep for the remainder of the turn.
This is one of those games where everything has gone right for Alex. He's gotten all 3 Hypnosis hits, 3 turns of sleep on Reshiram, 2 turns of sleep on Calyrex, 1 turn of sleep now on Porygon 2, and a critical hit onto Calyrex Ice Rider. So it's just been an absolute disaster. I think now Gothitelle maybe finally considers switching out. One of the things you have to think there is you definitely have to be nervous about Jeremy just like max quaking as you switch into an Incineroar, getting a knockout and then getting an attack boost as well. So they're saying, okay, even if I miss the Hypnosis, well, you still got to wake up with Calyrex Ice Rider, even if you get Trick Room up. The crazy thing here is like, right, like it felt like Jeremy actually had a lot of comeback potential if even a single Hypnosis misses. Now it feels pretty tough with, you know, every single one connecting and no guarantee of either Pokemon waking up here.
Yeah, that helping hand from Gothitelle is also going to help out. Calyrex, though, waking up in time to go for a max guard, so it's not quite over yet, depending on if this Porygon 2 can wake up. It woke up, and it went for Trick Room, which means finally this Calyrex Ice Rider will have the opportunity to attack.
Jeremy finding the one play that works out there, right? Like, from Alex's end, if you switch Gothitelle out into Incineroar, you get the Intimidate off, then the next turn you can fake out plus Spatial Rend onto it. But the thing is, that only works if you're really expecting to protect, and, you know, if the Palkia stays asleep for another turn, you just win the game immediately, and if it decides to go for a Max Quake rather than the Protect prediction, you also just win. So, Jeremy finding the one play that works out, and now, you know, Calyrex is a Pokemon that has really impressive late-game potential, so we'll see. Gothitelle here is going to switch out, bringing the Intimidate back out onto the field. The thing is, like, the Calyrex Ice Rider is such low HP that as soon as you knock that out, you win the game, so that's all what you're looking for.
That's all you're looking for in Calyrex Ice Rider, especially after this third attack drop, is going to struggle to deal damage. But Porygon 2 getting in on that Intimidate action with an Eerie Impulse. We saw it do fantastic things with that Zapdos in the previous game. Now it's Palkia's turn to join in on the fun. Glacial Lance will connect with both the Incineroar and the Palkia, but again, thanks to the Intimidates, does not deal a lot of damage. Will also activate the eject button on that Incineroar. I think it's the Gothitelle that has to come back out here at this point.
You can bring either, because like Rillaboom could also come out and just, you know, go for the Grassy Glide, finish things off, but Gothitelle now offers you a fake out, can even reverse the Trick Room. Spatial Rend is going to connect, but notably at -2 special attack. Does have a high crit chance, he's not going to get the crit here though.
Yeah, very close. Looks like one more Spatial Rend will be enough to knock out this Calyrex, but hey, if a critical hit is to be found on the Glacial Lance, could be a way for Jeremy to try and claw his way back into this game. But you do have to also worry about that fake out pressure now. Yeah,
all you need is one more hit on Calyrex, it faints, and Porygon 2 is never winning the game after that, right? So that's all you're looking for, and there are so many possibilities that you could go for. You could fake out, you could even like fake out Trick Room as a possibility, to reverse the Trick Room. Obviously that gets a little bit dicey if Jeremy actually reads that and clicks Trick Room himself, but the Gothitelle now can always just pivot back out into Incineroar for further Intimidates onto the Calyrex Ice Rider as well. So plenty of options here. It is actually going to be the Protect on Calyrex to start.
Yeah, I liked how you mentioned the possibility to get that second Intimidate in, as that's something we saw Alex do in his match against Paul Ruiz. You know,
it is the double trick
consistently making those switches, but what an incredible read from Alex here, going for the Trick Room to untrick room, the untrick room that Jeremy just trick roomed.
Yeah, I think it was actually the read by Jeremy, right? Because right now Jeremy wants the Trick Room up, and that's, you know, maybe it's still, you know, fine, because there's the Incineroar and the Rillaboom anyway, so now you can just switch into the Incineroar, get the Intimidate, go for an Earth Power, KO the Calyrex. Maybe Spatial Rend here, you know, because you're afraid of the Eerie Impulse, but I mean, if a Glacial Lance crits here, things could get a little bit more interesting. I still think it's so tough to win this endgame, but Jeremy has at least called, you know, all the turns correctly so far. Foul Play does do a decent amount into Palkia.
It does, and this Glacial Lance, you know, again, critical hit guarantees that knockout on the Palkia at this point. It's possible that chip damage did not make a difference, but within range of another Foul Play knocking it out, which I think is the important takeaway here. Spatial Rend will pick up the knockout on that Calyrex, and I think it's finally time for us to start turning our eyes towards Game 2.
Yeah, I mean, this game effectively felt over, like, you know, 6 turns ago, but Jeremy was at least making, like, the correct play, like, turn after turn after turn to try to claw back into it. The reality is, like, he just built himself into such a deficit that it was really difficult to come back from it, right? And so I think the game plan in the second game is do not let Alex get the chance to go for Hypnosis as much as he did. And One crazy adjustment, I don't think Jeremy will go for it, but you could, is bringing Alecki and Dynamaxing it for a Max Lightning on turn 1, because Alecki Max into Rillaboom Gothitelle is actually surprisingly effective.
You could also consider Dynamaxing the Tapu Fini at that point. Like, if you wanted to risk the same lead as last game, just knowing that seemed to work out well, except for the speed on the Rillaboom. You just go for the max, you use a max Starfall to get the terrain back up, and that's another way you could stop that. But we're just going to slowly start ticking the time away here as, Trick Room still has a few turns left. Porygon 2 just going to hang around, do what it does best, stay on the field.
And it makes sense, right? If you're in Jeremy's shoes right now, why not just take a little bit of extra time to start thinking about your Game 2 game plan? That was a really interesting match, right? Because it actually felt like Calyrex Ice Rider under Trick Room could have completely demolished Alex. So even with the Hypnosises all going in Alex's favor, it feels like, okay, Calyrex might actually be really strong here if I position it correctly. So I think Jeremy now maybe taking some time to think, okay, how do I get Calyrex Ice Rider safely to the point where then I can just sweep under Trick Room, right? It's not that easy. You have to solve the, Hypnosis problem in the early game, and then it's also about positioning Calyrex to a point where it can actually Dynamax safely. But yeah, I think, the reality for Alex here is that his damage output can be pretty scary. Gothitelle is amazing here for Hypnosis and helping hand support, but it does not have any attacks. And so you can't actually deal damage with him. That's a big deal because it means it's almost a useless Pokemon after the Hypnosis and helping hand support.
Yeah, but I almost feel like Porygon 2 is in a very similar position. I mean, Foul Play, yes, does deal damage, but you have the benefit of using your opponent's attack stat for that. And when you're facing a Pokemon like Palkia, that attack stat just isn't really there. So I think one adjustment I'd love to see from Jeremy going into Game 2 is just maybe trying to use this Porygon a little bit earlier. I mean, it does such a great job of staying around on the field, and it looks like both these trainers honestly are playing a really, really intense information game at this point, which, you gotta respect. I think one of the things that I think about a lot, especially in positions like this where the players are just, taking their time, Trick Room's going around, everybody's getting a little health back from that grassy terrain, is that this is a lot of mental stress to be under, right? Like, you have to make sure that while you're sort of playing out your Game 2, you're not accidentally, throwing away your Game 1. You have to make sure that your win conditions are still there, and then just think about all these things at once, and it can be very exhausting, especially after an entire day of doing this.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's really no comeback potential for Porygon 2 here at all, especially with the knockoff reveal. Actually, that's a big piece of information, but it means that you have such a safer path against Porygon 2 as well. So once again, Jeremy just taking some time knowing, okay, this game is lost, but how can I come up with a better game plan going into the next one? So much of it is the lead matchup, because I also think a Calyrex Ice Rider lead into, if Alex were to go with the same mode, right, Gothitelle Rillaboom, can be interesting. The scary thing is, once again, how do you deal with the sleep, right? Something like Regieleki Calyrex Ice Rider seems pretty crazy, but then you could max Lightning into Glacial Lance spam. And the thing is, then, you can switch out the Incineroar, but then it gets hit by the eject button. Nothing really wants to take a Max Lightning that well, especially because it's not Assault Vest Rillaboom as well. So I've talked about this Max Alecki option a lot. I feel like it's probably not going to happen, but it's definitely an interesting solution to setting up Electric Terrain to stop the sleep.
Well, you got time to consider as many possibilities as you want. And one possibility that I can't help but wonder, honestly, I mean, I know Alex still has all 4 of his Pokemon, but Porygon 2 seems to have access to a crazy amount of recovery. Is it possible that Jeremy finds some knockouts and tries to play the HP game at that point?
Normally you could in an endgame, but with the Eviolite being knocked off, there's definitely no chance. The other problem is Porygon 2 just has to spend too many turns recovering. And now the game actually should end this next turn, I think, especially with the Eviolite being removed now. So we'll finally see Grassy Glide onto the Porygon 2 with no Eviolite. That is going to be a knockout, so Alex will take this first game. Jeremy has had a lot of time now to think about what his adjustment going into Game 2 should be.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen that knockoff on Rillaboom yet up until that point, so that's really good information. Honestly, the fact that Jeremy was able to extend the game long enough for Alex to feel the pressure to reveal that, going back, knowing that now, some of those turns where it just felt like everything was slowing down was probably Alex just trying to decide, do I click knockoff knowing it guarantees the win, or do I try to keep that information?
That's a fantastic point. I think Alex is saying, okay, I'm just getting impatient, let's just end this game and go on to the next, right? And so, once again, I think the lead leads here are such a big deal because of Gothitelle alone. Gothitelle commands so much pressure where, you know, going into the game we were talking about, okay, if you lead incorrectly, it can just be a disaster. And I felt like Jeremy led correctly when I saw the leads, and then suddenly the terrains happen, you're like, whoa,
yeah,
hold on,
exactly.
the Rillaboom's actually slower. And so you normally don't expect that. Now both players know that. You got to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think there's a lot of counterplay to Goth and Rillaboom specifically, but Alex also played a very Palkia-centric strategy where I actually thought Calyrex Ice Rider would be really powerful for him. So my question going into game 2 is, does Alex actually commit to a Palkia again? Because now you know the speed interaction between the Tapu Fini. You're probably not going to get so fortunate on knocking out Tapu Fini in just 2 turns at the beginning of the game this time around. And I think Jeremy will apply a little bit more pressure early on. And I mean, certainly not lead the Fini in the Reshiram once again.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I think that the other thing you also have to keep in mind is that so much of that matchup on Alex's side of the field was those Hypnosis hits.
Yes, exactly.
And like certainly you can go for those again, but it's not going to be a consistent strategy. And when you're 1 game away from moving on to the finals here at a regional championship, you know, it might be tempting to rely on the Hypnosis, especially if you know it makes your win con just that much easier to achieve like we saw, but high risk, high reward.
Absolutely. I think another approach Jeremy could take is like maxing Reshiram and then like Quaking for special defense boost, but that only works if you eliminate Gothitelle first. The fact like Gothitelle's faster than Reshiram is a big deal, and this is like max speed Gothitelle is pretty common because you don't need that much bulk when you have a Focus Sash anyway, and so that allows you to outspeed things like Rillaboom, like Incineroar, and like Reshiram in this case, given that Reshiram doesn't actually have any speed investment. And so the idea here is, yeah, what is Alex going to do with the lead? Because I think that sets the pace of this battle so much, and it felt like Jeremy was in a rough spot after that lead. And honestly, if Alex just missed some Hypnosis there, because Gothitelle just doesn't apply much offensive pressure, and because like Incineroar doesn't have a recovery berry, like, you know, Calyrex Ice Rider can snowball the game very quickly for Jeremy.
Yeah, Gothitelle, not typically known as a speed Pokemon, but here it is, all super speedy. I love how Alex's team has like the max speed on Goth, presumably, and I'm guessing minimum speed on Rillaboom.
Yeah.
You know, I know some trainers were picking up that tech to basically speed tie with minimum speed female Indeedee to try and win the terrain war, so to speak. But in here, it's just slower than Tapu Fini,
yes,
period.
it's Regieleki and Calyrex. That's what I was talking about, but there's no Rillaboom this time from Alex's end. He recognizes, like, if a Rillaboom were to come out here, it would be a complete disaster for Alex, right? Because you can just go Lightning, Glacial Lance. So that was the lead adjustment I was talking about. Alex also makes the lead adjustment, though, and this is what I mean. He drops Palkia this time. Is Calyrex Ice Rider coming out?
Well, at least Jeremy has the electric terrain if he decides to go for it, for preventing some of those Hypnosises like we saw in that game 1. But, you know, for now, Fake Out plus Calyrex, a very viable option here. Yeah,
and, you know, Calyrex here can Dynamax immediately and just go for the Max Quake, right? And if you look at Jeremy's team, there's no free switch into Max Quake. The best you're going to get is a Porygon 2 or an Incineroar for that quick Intimidate, right? And so I think Alex taking a lot of time to think, okay, there's no way I'm going to get away with Rillaboom Gothitelle again. What is his best answer into it? Eleki Calyrex is one of them. So Gothitelle's actually going to switch out here. The thing about clicking Fake Out on Frontless is a little bit scary, right? Because either Pokemon can Dynamax. So Incineroar now comes in, gets the Intimidate off onto Calyrex Ice. And if it takes an attack this turn, we'll bounce right back out so that Gothitelle can come right back in. But our first Dynamax of this game 2 here in top 4 will be from Alex, and it's going to be the Calyrex Ice Rider. And one thing we did not see play out yet is how these two Pokemon interact speed-wise. Exactly.
Very important to note that Alex's Calyrex Ice Rider went first.
So we'll see if Jeremy decided to Dynamax the Calyrex. He might actually choose to not Dynamax either. It's exactly what he goes for. So this is interesting because it's actually going to be Volt Switch into the eject button. First of all, look at that damage, honestly, Incineroar, right? The other interesting thing is that now the Incineroar gets out. It has to go switch into something first.
Yeah, so Jeremy has the opportunity to respond to the Gothitelle making an appearance. You know, this is one of the few instances where you can switch and
look at that interaction,
switch.
though, because of Gothitelle. Yeah, you get trapped in. That's such a unique interaction. It is just going to be Max Quake, but from this end, maybe Jeremy's okay with the trade. You know, it's like, yes, I lose the Regieleki, but at least it gives me a free switch in. The whole idea of leading Eleki was to pressure with the Max Lightning early on, but you're not going to Dynamax when Calyrex Ice Rider is out on the field.
No, you really aren't. And now Calyrex is building up those special defense boosts so that if Jeremy does have the Reshiram in the back, you know, it's going to really struggle to find that damage. But again, what a crazy interaction. I think we all learned something here today, the way that Shadow Tag will apply immediately on the field as soon as it comes in, regardless of when it comes in. So good things to know.
Honestly, yeah, and one other really important point there, we were talking about the Calyrex speed interaction, is that Max Quake went after the Glacial Lance, and so Jeremy's Calyrex is actually going to be faster here. Now the scary thing, though, is You have Gothitelle onto the field. We saw how Hypnosis played out previously. So did you even bring Tapu Fini this time around? Because if not, let's say you have Reshiram or Instant in the back, suddenly Gothitelle pressures both slots with Fake Out, both slots with Hypnosis. And so this is why I love high-level VGC. It's so fun to see both, like, one player make an adjustment and then the other player make an adjustment for that adjustment.
Reshiram is Jeremy's Pokemon of choice coming out onto the field, which means Gothitelle has a very tough decision to be making this turn. What an incredible matchup, and what a great sort of comeback for Gothitelle, who is a Pokemon that we've seen do well in past VGC formats, but yet to make an appearance in Series 12.
This is one of my all-time favorite Pokemon. Like, I brought it to the World Championships in 2014, 2015. It just, like, limits so many lines of action that your opponent can take. But this is a really interesting spot, right? Right now, both Reshiram and Calyrex can Dynamax. It's a little scary to Dynamax the Reshiram here. You can max Wormwind, right? But like, does the max Flare KO Calyrex? I'm not even sure a double up can KO the Calyrex right now. And so, you know, if you're Jeremy, maybe you decide to max the Calyrex instead because you think, okay, I can at least take attacks a little bit better. Or you're like, you know what, I can max Reshiram, I can go for a max Wormwind, decrease your attack. And it looks like he's going to opt for the Reshiram route. But if a Hypnosis goes onto that slot, I mean...
50% of the time, it works every time, so we'll have to see. I want to steal a saying from an old friend of mine.
Oh, Hypnosis is going to miss this time!
You have to buy a ticket to enter the raffle, and unfortunately for Alex, the raffle did not quite get there this time around. Max Flare will pick up the knockout on that Gothitelle, so no sleep on the field for Alex this game. A great try from that Gothitelle, though. High horsepower will deal a little bit of damage to that Calyrex, and a Max Quake from Alex's Dynamaxed Calyrex Ice will go into that Reshiram and deal over half damage.
Yeah, Reshiram critically having enough bulk there to take it after the attack boost from earlier, and so big turn there, right? If Hypnosis hits Reshiram, it feels like a complete disaster. But that's the thing, Hypnosis is so high variance, and Jeremy this time realizing, okay, I'm just not going to let you get nearly as many Hypnoses off as you did in the previous game, and also gets the miss. You know, feels like a miss was bound to happen given how the set has played out so far. So now Reshiram in a position where you have set up the Sun. Incineroar is going to come out, so it can pressure with a Fake Out onto the Calyrex Ice Rider right now. You could also just go for either a Parting Shot onto the Reshiram with Flare Blitz, or even Dark type attack onto the Calyrex. The big thing here is you have set up the Sun. Calyrex does have that special defense boost though, so maybe you can take a Max Flare. But critically this time around, you're not asleep. And now with Gothitelle removed, you can also consider switching out, and Jeremy still has one hidden Pokemon in the back.
Yeah, and looking at the team and looking at how we played game one, I can't help but wonder, it's going to either be that Porygon 2 or that Incineroar. Finally free to switch it in if that's an option that Jeremy wants to take. Would be a great opportunity to try and drop the Intimidades on that Calyrex Ice Rider. But Alex going to switch first with the Rillaboom taking the field for that Incineroar. Going to set up that grassy terrain we saw do wonders for Alex in game one, and Calyrex as well going to switch out and reveal Jeremy's last Pokemon, Tapu Fini. So a little bit of an inversion of what we saw game one. This time the misty terrain will be up on the field thanks to the fact that Calyrex Ice Rider is slower than Incineroar.
Yeah, and so Calyrex here can safely Max Quick in Reshiram. It's Assault Vest, and Reshiram can go for a relatively free Max Flare as well. So boosted by the Sun, but thanks to that special defense boost from earlier, not going to be able to pick up a knockout, and it's actually going to be the Hailstorm here, so that allows you to reset the weather. It does deny a special defense boost, but you are able to still get the knockout onto Calyrex there.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. I think removing the Reshiram from the field, removing Dynamax, but now Jeremy down to his last two Pokemon. The Calyrex Ice Rider gets to come in pretty comfortably, all things considered. Tapu Fini, one of the greatest support Pokemon, I think, available to Jeremy on his team. Can do some good damage. I think we've seen Nature's Madness in the past from him, and especially if you're looking at a Pokemon like Calyrex Ice Rider, who's already going to be dealing so much damage off of Glacial Lance, being able to have your opponent's health prior to that attack means you're so much closer to getting those knockouts and getting those Chilling Rain boosts. If he's able to get that set up here, that's really going to be an incredible comeback for him.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing to know in terms of the speed interaction is that Jeremy's Calyrex is faster, right?
Yeah.
And so Calyrex here only down to 69 HP at this point. From Alex's end, you do have a Fake Out this turn that you can go for. You could also switch out into the Incineroar, get another Intimidate off as well. But this Calyrex Tapu Fini combo can be pretty scary. Now, the thing to note is that on Alex's end, you do have a bunch of attacks attack boosts. But Calyrex and Feeny are bulky enough to either take a Glacial Lance or a potential high horsepower, for example. And so even though Alex has the Pokemon lead, I think Jeremy definitely has the ability to bring it back right now. So a big question here is, for Rillaboom, do you just go for Fake Out? Because if you do, Calyrex can just Glacial Lance, and that's a complete disaster. So, one play you can make is protect Calyrex, switch into Incineroar, and then Fake Out in Trick Room even the next turn. So we'll have to see, but I think Rillaboom here is going to switch out, and yeah, we're going to see that.
Yeah, every little bit helps, and an Intimidate down on the Calyrex Ice Rider, especially when it's suited to just start doing what it does best and go off on a ride, so to speak, is the best, I think, way to set up yourself for success at this point. Calyrex also on Alex's side of the field going for a Protect this turn, just playing things super duper safe, as Nature's Madness will not connect with it as a result. Calyrex on Jeremy's side of the field going for that Glacial Lance, so a nice amount of chip damage down on the field. Certainly could have been disastrous, though, if it wasn't for the Protect.
Yeah, basically going all in on trying to knock out the Calyrex there, so it ends up being a pretty nice switch in here. You do get the Intimidate off. Feeny is going to take the hail damage before Incineroar, so it just confirm that it's faster here. And so now you do have Fake Out with Incineroar, right? And so you can Fake Out and then actually go for a Trick Room in this position, so Fake Out into Calyrex and Trick Room. But the question is, how do you deal enough damage to Jeremy's Calyrex Ice Rider at this point? Both of these Pokemon are still fully healthy, and important to note that there indeed is the Heal Pulse on the Tapu Fini. In addition, we saw the Grassy Glide damage from Rillaboom earlier on in turn 1 of the first game. It doesn't knock out the Tapu Fini, right? So that means that Fini can potentially get 2 attacks off. And even if it's just a single Heal Pulse on a Calyrex, right? Everything's in Glacial Lance range right now. It's not going to get knocked out this turn, but with hail damage ticking down as well, things are quickly adding up for Calyrex to look for this late game sweep.
Yeah, I can see why Alex wanted to go for that Max Hailstorm in order to knock out Jeremy's Reshiram, but it was really unfortunate that the hail is now paying off more so for Jeremy. A Protect from his own Calyrex Ice Rider this turn, stopping it from taking any damage from the Fake Out on Alex's side of the field. Nature's Madness finally finding its mark against that Calyrex, going to slice its remaining health in half, and a Glacial Lance, no Trick Room, going to connect with the Tapu Fini for a nice amount of chip damage.
Okay, yeah, so like you pointed out, no Trick Room there. Now, I'm interested in the speed interaction between Incineroar and Calyrex. I mean, look how much Glacial Lance does there, right, thanks to the attack boost, so it's a considerable amount of damage. This is one of those positions where, Tapu Fini just doesn't feel like he can get the knockout with Moonblast, so might as well just guaranteed having Calyrex Ice Rider's HP stat right now. But you can see, right, without recovery here, everything's just getting chipped away more and more and more. At this point, the question I asked earlier is still, how do you knock out Calyrex, right? One approach is, okay, you knock out the Tapu Fini, force this to be a 2v1 or even have all 3 of your Pokemon, and then just, target Calyrex with attacks because you are at +2 attack. Fake Out into high horsepower, into Grassy Glide can be a combo of attacks that you can go for in this endgame as well. But Jeremy having the faster Calyrex here makes things really tricky, honestly. And so Incin here can either, go for a parting shot onto the Calyrex. You can go for just a fire type attack as well. Calyrex, I think, has to protect here because otherwise you're going to fade to an attack from the opposing Calyrex.
Yeah, and that Tapu Fini missed is the move of choice. Now that is a very interesting tech move that stops the parting shot. Jeremy keeping that piece of information just locked in until he absolutely needed it. Now this Calyrex Ice Rider free to go for a Glacial Lance, going to find that knockout on the Incineroar and get the attack boost from Chilling Day as a result.
That is, we've seen 2 really unique interactions this game, right? Volt switch into Eject Button into Gothitelle does not allow you to switch, and now Mist actually prevents the parting shot from going off. So what a cool move. We don't really see that on Tapu Fini at all, partially because, Tapu Fini just isn't very common in this format. Yesterday we were joking about how we were talking about the terrains and Tapu Fini got no love, but here it is, right? And so now you have Rillaboom out. You do have Fake Out for a turn, right? So you can think about going for a Fake Out onto the Calyrex Ice Rider. Now Calyrex can respond to that by just going for a Protect. And so if you just Fake Out and then go for an attack, then the next turn Calyrex just Glacial Lance double knockout, right? Yeah. You can go for a Trick Room here, potentially. So that's one option, right? Fake Out Calyrex, go for Trick Room, then Glacial Lance. So then my question is, can a Fini Moonblast KO the Calyrex right now?
I'm not sure, and I think it has to come down to that, because if you forego the Fake Out and go for Grassy Glide onto the Fini to try and get that knockout, then Calyrex just wins at this point for Jeremy regardless.
You have to deny the Glacial Lance here,
you have to. Unless Alex just goes, a couple levels of Galaxy Brain to try and predict a Protect, but just playing playing it safe. A fake out into that Calyrex. No protect off
There's
Jeremy.
The moon blast.
There's
Is
the
it
moon blast
enough?
into Calyrex, and it's not enough to get that knockout. Calyrex on Alex's side of the field, able to set up that trick room and give itself that speed advantage it was desperately looking for.
Okay, now Hail stops. You know, Calyrex has a bunch of attack boosts right now. You're still staring down a Glacial Lance, which will pick up a double knockout. Your Calyrex will move first. The Rillaboom also has that Grassy Glide, right? So one play you can make here is, I mean, Feeny, like, do you just go for the Grassy Glide onto the Calyrex as well as the Glacial Lance, right? Just try to pick up the knockout. You have high horsepower as an option here as well. Basically, how well trained is the opposing Calyrex? How well can it take these combo of attacks? One other thing to watch out for is, let's say you go all in, double up on Calyrex. Then Feeny can just go for another Moonblast onto the Calyrex and pick up a KO. Another line you can take here is Grassy Glide Feeny, and then go for a +2 move from Calyrex onto the opposing Calyrex. But then it's like, does either single target Glacial Lance or high horsepower get the knockout? I personally wouldn't expect it to get the KO.
No, I feel like your best shot would be high horsepower at that point, and then you have to add accuracy on top of everything else that you're looking for. And especially in this tough situation, you really got to optimize for what you can do consistently. You can't be making...
protect on the Calyrex. It is Grassy Glide onto it. High horsepower here is going to connect.
All right.
Oh, but it's not enough.
The knockout by just a little bit, and that Glacial Lance now connecting with both of the Pokemon on Alex's side of the field, going to easily score that knockout on Calyrex, going to knock out that Rillaboom and bring us into Game 3 here in Indianapolis.
This is such a fun set. I mean, talk about the adjustments going into this end game. I was thinking maybe Calyrex does do enough damage to get the knockout, but that's what we're talking about. Is it how much bulk does it have? And it actually has enough to even survive the double up. Obviously, if you get the knockout there, then the Feeny just can't ever win against the Rillaboom. But Calyrex actually hung out with a decent amount of HP there as well, more than I would have expected it to.
Yeah, that was comfortable. Like, that feels like something that was counted for. Maybe not in this exact situation, but certainly something that Jeremy knew going into this. And as a result, just able to stay out on the field, forego the protect, get the damage down, and bring himself into a Game 3. And we spent so much time talking about adjustments between Game 1 and Game 2. I feel like it's so much more stressful now because you see the adjustments from Game 1 into Game 2. How do you then take that into Game 3?
I think this is actually literally one of the hardest parts of high-level competitive Pokemon because you only have, a minute and a half in Team Preview to decide what you're going to do. And this time around, we didn't have like a 5-minute end game where you had time to think about things, right? So the guys are going right into Team Preview right now. For Jeremy's end, it's like, okay, the Alecki Calyrex lead it worked out even though you didn't face off against Rillaboom. So do you still feel comfortable about that, right? And from Alex's end, what adjustments can you make this time around? Like, the problem was basically Calyrex Ice Rider from Jeremy's end just getting so many Glacial Lances off in the end game. So to be able to you got to handle that a little bit better. But it's so hard to think about, like, what is the absolute best lead for both ends right now. I mean, I don't think Alex would ever want to gamble and go back to Rillaboom Gothitelle, but you could do that saying, okay, Jeremy saw that, my Calyrex lead was really good into his Alecki. This time around, he's going to save it a little bit better.
It's a tough call, and especially, I feel like this is one of those moments that you look back on, once this tournament is over, once these trainers have gone home for the weekend, like, you just remember sitting in this position, what was going through your head, how do I play this consistently? Like, I don't even think it's about necessarily trying to outpredict your opponent at Team Preview at this point, because these teams are so evenly matched, it feels like. It's just, what's my consistent line into this matchup, and how do I go from there to win?
I think for Alex, like, now that your Calyrex Ice Rider is slower, and like Rillaboom slower than Tapu Fini, for example, do you maybe think about setting up Trick Room, right? Because it's like, Trick Room hasn't really come out. I mean, it was relevant in the first game, like, it was set up in both games, and it felt like it wasn't like, okay, this is like absolutely game defining in the early game. So this time around, the other thing is with Gothitelle, do you keep flipping coins with Hypnosis? Because Jeremy is willing to respond with both Dynamax, Regieleki, and Tapu Fini. So maybe this time around you drop Gothitelle instead. The trap isn't that valuable if Jeremy is able to respond accordingly with the lead, and he was willing to do that, right? So maybe you lead Fake Out plus Trick Room this time around. Just Dynamax the Calyrex Ice Rider and just try to get as much damage, as many KOs with it as possible on the Trick Room.
Yeah, Gothitelle as a lead was allowed to stay on the field for quite a few turns, and if you're able to sort of turn that on its head and go for that Trick Room, especially now that the speed is in your favor, then that is the way to go. Gothitelle and Calyrex Ice Rider out on the field for Alex, and Reshiram and Regieleki on the field for Jeremy.
Oh man, so Jeremy making another adjustment, bringing the Reshiram this time around, saying, okay, last time when I led Alecki, the problem with it is that I couldn't really pressure Calyrex with a lot of damage. This time around, if you go with the the same lead from the previous game, which felt like a pretty good lead, while I'll have Reshiram to Dynamax and potentially Max Warm way to decrease your attack, or even Max Flare just to get damage off immediately. So I like the Reshiram adjustment here. You know, the thing here is on turn 1, Gothitelle could theoretically go for a Fake Out, and then the Calyrex, you could Trick Room, but then you risk a Max Flare, and that's really scary. So the alternative is maybe Dynamaxing, going for a Max Quake. You could also just go for Hypnosis with Gothitelle immediately onto Reshiram, and if Reshiram Dynamaxes, you hit the Hypnosis, that's an absolute disaster.
Well, we got our first Dynamax of this game 3 from Jeremy. It's not necessarily going to be the Alecki this time around. Instead, it's going to be that Reshiram. Dynamax will protect it from that priority, from the Fake Out. Will not allow it to flinch, but...
Does Alecki protect is the question here.
Does Alecki protect? First, another Dynamax. Going to be the Calyrex Ice Rider, most likely. I think it has to be. I don't think you ever got the Dynamax Gothitelle, let's be real.
With no attacks, you know, so
yeah.
I guess you would Max Strike with it, but, you know, Calyrex Dynamax is here. This first turn is so interesting immediately because Alex could Fake Out Max Quake at Alecki. Alecki here, though, could Volt Switch if you don't Fake Out. Tapu Fini comes in, sets up Misty Terrain, so it is going to be the Fake Out here.
Connecting with that Reggie, Alecki flinching it. No attacks this turn. Max Flare from that Reshiram into the Dynamax Calyrex Ice Rider, going to bring it down to just about 30% of its health remaining. Will set up the Sun, which means Max Flare is now more powerful, but Calyrex Ice Rider setting up some special defense boost for its side of the team, going for that double into the Regieleki and securing the knockout.
So I think, you know, I was asking, does that Regieleki want to protect in this position? And for Jeremy's side, the answer is I don't really want to unless I'm hard reading Fake Out plus Max Quake, because the idea there is, okay, what is threatening my Reshiram right now? It's essentially Hypnosis from the Gothitelle, right? Max Quake from Calyrex will hurt, but you know Reshiram's bulky enough and is faster. And so from Jeremy's end, it's like, okay, well, if you commit the Fake Out, that means you're not clicking Hypnosis. And if you go for Hypnosis, I'm just going to Volt Switch in your Gothitelle, go out until Tapu Fini, and then bang.
Or I just send in Tapu Fini once my Regieleki's been knocked out, and I get that one turn of protection from the Hypnosis regardless.
Yeah, so now what's interesting is you can potentially Max Guard Calyrex, and Gothitelle now can angle for a Trick Room. Jeremy's response to that then would maybe be a Max Flare plus a Moonblast, but notably there was that special defense from the Max Quake boost previously. So now my question is, okay, is the Gothitelle bulky enough to actually take a double from the Tapu Fini and from the Reshiram at the moment?
We also have to wonder about turn order here, because if Reshiram goes first and brings Gothitelle down to Focus Sash, I mean, I guess Nature's Madness will always round up in terms of damage, so it will still do 1 damage, but that's something I think to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, and if Fini's faster than it's Nature's Madness into a Max Flare, that might be enough for a KO. Calyrex is actually going to switch out, not going to try for the Max Guard play, and it might be Rillaboom coming in. You change the terrain, you go for Hypnosis!
All right, Rillaboom on the field. Grassy terrain back once again. No longer will Misty Terrain be protecting the Pokemon on Jeremy's side of the field.
60% chance from Hypnosis right now, and it misses!
It misses. Reshiram free to attack. Tapu Fini is indeed faster than the Reshiram. Moonblast into that Gothitelle will do just enough damage to break that Focus Sash. Max Flare into the Rillaboom for the knockout as well. So very well played there from Jeremy. It's unfortunate we saw those Hypnosises finding their marks in that game 1, but just completely failing to come through in these latter games.
Yeah, that play worked out perfectly for Jeremy. I thought it was a little bit scary because if Calyrex Max Guards and the Gothitelle actually clicks Trick Room, suddenly things get really scary, right? But this is the downside of Hypnosis. Gothitelle doesn't do anything else, right, if not apply pressure via Hypnosis and Helping Hand, and if you miss, you just completely waste the turn. The Max Flare actually eliminates the biggest threat to the Tapu Fini as well. So the thing is, Gothitelle here still has another opportunity to click Hypnosis because the Reshiram does not have Protect or Max Guard, and it's slower. You know, you can't just go for Hypnosis. Calyrex is also a Pokemon that does have really incredible late game comeback potential, right? But right now you're staring down both the fully healthy Fini and Reshiram. I think you have to go for Hypnosis on a Reshiram, right? At least to give yourself a chance to stay in this game. And then the question with Calyrex is, you just Trick Room.
I think you have to Trick Room.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, this is your only opportunity for speed control. And if that Reshiram is allowed to move first, you know, yes, the Gothitelle can be faster and go for those Hypnosis.
And it misses again!
It misses again. Alex just not finding his mark this time around. Nature's Madness into that Gothitelle, putting it well within KO range for this Max Wormwind from that Reshiram. Also going to drop the Calyrex Ice Riders attack stat by 1 stage, making it that much harder for that Calyrex to find the knockouts it needs. But revealing a white herb, which is something we have not seen revealed this entire set. High horsepower into that Reshiram for a little bit of damage, but Jeremy just in such a comfortably commanding position right now.
Yeah, so Alex is now going to be down to his final Pokemon, and Calyrex actually notably did not go for a Trick Room there, right? And it's actually Incineroar, so, no Palkia coming out into this matchup. Palkia actually would have been in a pretty sweet position here because suddenly it's like, okay, I pressure the Reshiram with the Spatial Ren and you don't have the terrain up. But now you're down to your final 2 Pokemon. Incineroar's item here with the eject button really completely useless as there's nothing to eject out into either. And so the upside here is Incineroar can click Fake Out onto Reshiram, and you can actually click that Trick Room with Tapu Fini, right? And so Alex deciding to stagger his Trick Room by a turn. Would have been interesting if you just set up Trick Room last turn, then Reshiram here, is in base form, and so high horsepower, just does more than it would or it would do the same amount, right? But it has less HP at this point. So now you've got Instant Out. Like, you obviously have to be worried about Calyrex fainting here. Moonblast isn't really doing that much damage. And the other critical thing here is Jeremy's Calyrex is faster, so maybe there's potential for Calyrex to pull something off here, but it's tough because, like, Reshiram still is a pretty big threat, and the Calyrex in the back is waiting to come in and just get one attack off to KO Calyrex on Alex's side.
There's also still the heal pulse on that Tapu Fini as well you have to contend with.
And
that's the move of choice for Tapu Fini into the Reshiram, going to heal it right back up to full. Will flinch and not be able to attack this turn. Calyrex will get the Trick Room up as a result. But this Reshiram at full health, this Tapu Fini at full health, it seems like it's going to be so difficult for Alex to find the damage he needs to score these knockouts.
Heal Pulse a game changer there. You called it right before it came out, and the thing is now it allows Reshiram to be so healthy. You don't have to worry about just getting one shot by a high horsepower. So at this point, Calyrex get up for a protect. You can maybe get some chip damage off of the Incineroar, or maybe you say, okay, I'm just going to go for a critical hit high horsepower right now. Jeremy's not even going to risk that critical hit potential, just going to switch out into Calyrex instead.
I think if you let Trick Room expire, if this game has that many turns left, you want that Reshiram at full health coming out onto the field, and saving that for later is just a very good call from Jeremy. High horsepower from Calyrex into Calyrex does a little bit of damage. Throat Shock, following it up for some super effective damage against Jeremy's Calyrex. But
is it high horse, or is it a heal pulse going on to Calyrex right now to heal it all the way back up? It is! You just activated the policy! You get the heal all the way back up. What an amazing play by Jeremy there, and now you're staring down a very strong Calyrex, and the sun just expired.
Will move second under Trick Room to Alex's benefit, but I just don't see anything that can stop this combination of Tapu Fini, heal pulsing Calyrex, and just taking all of that damage away.
The heal pulse here has been so impressive, and as you mentioned, the Calyrex here being able to outspeed the Incineroar, meaning all you have to do is click high horsepower into that slot. The only scary thing is, of course, you could miss, right? So if you miss and, some critical hits happen here, maybe things get a little bit scarier. But that was an amazing play. And you can see here, as you were talking about, you're like, okay, what about the possibility of stalling out Trick Room? Might as well at least, play a little bit more passively right now. You already have this, like, late-game monster just waiting to be unleashed. But at the same time, Tapu Fini is at no risk of taking damage. So why not stall on a turn of Trick Room while you can?
Yeah, Moonblast will do a nice amount of damage here if that's the move of choice. Nature's Madness into that Incineroar as well would also be greatly appreciated, as that will guarantee a knockout onto it with really any attack, I think, at this point by that Calyrex. And Nature's Madness will find its mark on that Incineroar and cut its health in half.
I'm wondering if Jeremy's like, I really don't want to risk a high horsepower miss, and now like Glacial Lance does so much damage to both Pokemon, right? And so it's always so stressful when like you have these end games where you feel like you've basically gotten it locked up, but if you have that one unlucky miss, things can get pretty terrifying. But Jeremy just in such a commanding position right now, and this set, is all about hypnosis, right? It worked out amazing in the first game, but, you can also understand why maybe Alex felt like he needed to go for it. Like, if you don't feel like the matchup is very much in your favor, well, 60% chance to just stop a Pokemon can give you so many more benefits than, a 0% chance to stop said Pokemon, right? So
exactly. I mean, that's the same reason why a lot of people run Sleep Powder over Protect on Venusaur, especially if it's the G-Max variant.
Yeah.
Just having that option for when you need it can really open up doors. But the thing about best of 3 is that there's enough game to go around that those numbers don't always work out. Critical hit from that Glacial Lance onto the opposing Calyrex, but
and yeah, no high horsepower. It's just Glacial Lance here. No risk. Yeah, not risking any misses here.
Just playing it as safe as possible. Does miss the knockout on both these Pokemon. Throat Chop will connect with the Calyrex on Jeremy's side of the field, but good old Tapu Fini, not with a Heal Pulse this time around, just a Moonblast to pick up that KO, and a critical hit to boot. You know, might as well just get that little extra damage down in there, because that definitely mattered in that calculation.
Jeremy played this endgame phenomenally. Like, I really feel like it was essentially over for a couple of turns now. I know we were like hyping it up a little bit, but at the same time, like, I just, the ability to switch in the Calyrex, like even get the policy activation and Heal Pulse, like that was so smart, because I think in that position you could also be tempted to just attack with the Reshiram immediately, but then you risk, you know, stuff like high horsepower, getting a critical hit or whatnot. So there are a lot of different ways you could play this endgame, but Jeremy decides to switch in the Calyrex, heal up, and Jeremy Rodrigues will move on to the finals here in Indianapolis to take, oh my gosh, and to have the chance of winning yet another regional